If you're designing a building and you're going to carve the basement that's going to go into the water table, that means that water table is at the ready to put an extra pressure on the outside of your building to try to lift it. And not only that, but any crack or any seam that you've got in there is prone to be able to be breached and let the water come into the basement. For Bell Atlantic, what we did was, and water table is pretty high in Philadelphia, it's around 15 and 18 feet down. We're down 30 feet to the bottom of the excavation. We said, we did a calculation to see how much weight we have to resist the hydrostatic pressure from lifting the building. It turned out to be something over a 6 to 7 foot deep concrete slab on the entire site. A lot of expense. So what they did, this is back before there was any, but they let the water come in and they pump the water into the municipal sewer system on a constant basis. If for some reason that pump doesn't, it is knocked out, electricity isn't there, and the generators don't kick in to keep it going, there are pop-ups in the slabs. If you're parked in Bell Atlantic, which is a public garage, you look at the bottom, that let that pressurized water come up, and it'll probably equilibrate somewhere around the second level. Give or take a floating Mercedes. But you gotta be ready to say it. In Saudi Arabia, they worry, even though we said we're in the desert, what are you worried about this thing? But they worry about heavy flash floods of rain, coursing underground, getting under a building and lifting up in the air. So we designed a building for more hydrostatic pressure than I've ever designed in my life. When it rains, water collects and water moves. And start to notice this stuff, that there's no such thing as a flat surface, and that things have got to move. And there's equation, let me put it on the board, for movements of water in the world of engineering. Q is equal to CIA. CIA, you should remember. But the coefficient, the thing that develops the quantity that we worry about dealing with and coping with, is a function of what the surface is, and it has to do with the friction of the surface, and how easily the water is able to move over it. I would be the intensity of the rain, so if it's raining at 1 inch per hour, we know that there's an awful lot of rain hitting the ground. It's got to go somewhere. So we multiply that times that coefficient that's the surface of the ground. We take the catchment area. This could be at a very grand scale, within a city, or it could be a roof itself. And we'll find out how much quantity of water we've got to be able to deal with. So we've got to size pipes. We've got to make sure that everything flows properly, so we don't get water coming back into the building to cause some problems. For me, light right now is interesting one, because of all these new LED bulbs out there. And maybe you don't know this, but if you take a look at sunlight, and you know that Isaac Newton, we gotta hate that.
Can you just pull this thing down?
Yeah, but I want to leave that. But if we take Isaac Newton, right, you have a prism and you run light through it, you'll get a spectrum. And as I understand it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, daylight has got a full array of frequencies that comprise white light as we perceive it. Right? So every frequency is in there. So the only true white light that's out there is sunlight. We spend most of our days in environments that don't have natural sunlight. We crave to have it. The only way you can see some daylight out there. And therefore we try to simulate daylight with artificial means. If you go into a steak restaurant, look up, more than likely you're going to see bulbs that are the old incandescent bulbs that are in there. Steakhouses do not want you to be using fluorescent lights above your head. The reason is that the incandescent light glows more to the reds, and therefore when you look at the piece of meat that you're paying $35 for, you see that wonderful, delicious kind of aspect to it. If you take that same piece of cooked meat and you put it under fluorescent, which tend to be more to the blue, it loses all of its charm. For a number of years, the federal government had specifications that in women's room, you had to use incandescent lights, and in men's room, you use fluorescent lights. And it was that women putting on makeup would be more flattered with what they saw in the mirror and more, self-assured with themselves, I guess, in that kind of a light. Now, we've taken that out of the specs, and now it's the same on both sides. I was talking last week to our lighting designer because we were being considered to do a restaurant that had primary kind of state thing to it. And say, what are you doing? Right now, they're using LEDs that have actually, it's typical LED, but it has a red component in it. It's a red aspect to it. They can tune to be able to bring that kind of a pop into the thing. For a long time we labored with photography. Now Kodachrome has lost its way. But the punch you would get from a slide, if you're in art history class, if you blow light through a transparency and you look at the screen, the vibrancy of the colors, I'm still believe this, is still better than what you're getting out of Proxima. The Proximas tend to flatten things a bit, they tend to pull them together. You know, for all that effort you've got on that computer screen to make them, and you go to the jury and you hit that button, and you know, it doesn't quite work. That's something that I think is still being looked at. Energy code right now is doing everything to take us away from incandescent entirely, and we're being driven into the world of doing these more elaborate and difficult things. As you know, the spectrum has got two brackets on it. It has ultraviolet on one end and it's got the infrared on the other. Ultraviolet, we were talking about before, you were moving back and you were going to get a wonderful tan from the light over here. Probably not from that one, right?
That's 1,000 watts.
Really? How much ultraviolet would come off it? Enough to, would we burn first or would we, infrared is what causes us to sunburn, and ultraviolet is what gives us that wonderful glowing bronze glow. Right? So with this baby, I would think we'd be more than.
UV is sunburn.
No, UV is TV.
Tan, yes.
But infrared is what causes a burn, isn't it? We have a dispute here. We got to go to a third party.
We'll figure this out later.
You and I will talk about that. But in my life, ultraviolet, when you say it, I worry about roofs. Because ultraviolet, the light from ultraviolet will break a roof down over time and cause it to deteriorate. So we do all these things to try to create surfaces up there that will deal with it. Infrared, when I hear about it, I think about a roof. That's what I use is the scanning gun to find out what my thermal transmission is that's coming through the roof, so I can see if I've got breaches in terms of insulation. So, boom, again, the spectrum of stuff and the light that's being emitted from it is something you've got to be aware of. I was thinking in terms of this waves and movement, and certainly with the events over the past year in terms of earthquakes, of how things are moving. When the earthquake hit San Francisco in 1990, it took from Palo Alto to the Dodger Stadium, it took 8 seconds for the wave to be able to hit. So let's do 8 seconds. So now, still not there. Now, all that time, if we had known what the characteristic of the wave was going to be, and it has a personality, and it has the way it's going to move, it has a period of oscillation to it. And if that period of oscillation is in sync with the period of oscillation of my building, I can start to head towards infinite amplitudes, which is resonance, destruction. But if I could find some way to take that information and through a wave, electronic or otherwise, get that information to a building, start to change the connections, loosen some joints, close some joints, I'm able to create a condition where I'm in effect those either from Long Island or seaside towns. If you dive under the wave, right, you come popping up the other side, no harm, no foul. If you stand there and try to shout at the wave, you die. Right? You get pounded, you get ripped into the rocky bottom. So I'm not looking for things in your career that's going to be able to make the building smart enough that these overlap of systems, of IT systems, again with physical systems, will enable buildings to change their characteristics to be able to survive waves. Bell Atlantic, with this thing, which I told you is pretty ample, the way that that stabilizes itself is that in the center of the building it has a tremendous, we'll do this on keyboards,